All right, welcome back. I'm glad you're still with us here on Morning at NTV. Time now for the Kickstarter, a discussion in which we'll be looking at the appointment of a substantive governor for the Republic of Uganda, 3 years after the death of Mutebile, who was acclaimed for much of the work that he did in marshalling economics and monetary policy for the nation. The new appointment is a man who is familiar with the job because he's been acting for the last 3 years. That was the deputy who is now designated governor, Dr. Michael Atingi-Ego, and will be deputized by Professor Augustus Nuwagaba, a man himself who is acclaimed across the globe for his analysis and knowledge on fiscal metrics, financial performance, as well as tax policy. The news of the appointments was greeted with a cautious optimism, that is in economic speak, and we do hope that when the two men get on with doing the job as they ought to, maybe the economic landscape will change for the better. I'm joined on set by Bernard Cankara. Bernard Cankara is a public policy scholar and analyst. He joins me to give us his perspective on this latest development, how it will pan out over the next few years as Mr. Atingi-Ego, of course, goes through the rigors of managing monetary policy here in the country. You're most welcome to the program, Bernard Cankara.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
How are you doing?
Not bad. I'm well. I'm well.
Great.
Yes.
The appointment of a substantive governor, first and foremost, comes as a huge relief to any person, especially those that are observers of the economy. I'm sure when that news came through, are you one of those that had a sigh of relief, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's a very critical position. When you run a country, it's like you're running a country without the head, because this is an economy.
That's right.
You might be making political decisions. You might be making all these other decisions that you might want to make. But if you do not have the critical economic decisions and people that are managing the finances of the economy, then there is a huge risk. So that position has been long overdue. The president, I don't know, in his wisdom, probably delayed extensively forever. We waited for this position. We advocated for it. We needed it to have come sooner than later. But nonetheless, we welcome the appointment. It has come at the right time. I think this will in many ways support government decisions, because whether we like it or not,
that's right,
this is a government and there is going to be money at play. We've seen a number of countries that have suffered in many ways uncontrolled inflations and many other issues that comes with vacuum at the helms of a central government position. So I think this is a welcome development. This is a welcome development. We want to see how Uganda's economy will shape up in light of this appointment, but this is a good welcome. And I think true to it, the caliber of the people that have been recommended for the job are outstanding persons. And Atingi-Ego, having consulted, I think he worked across African countries before getting this job as the deputy governor. But when he got the job, he needed also time to settle in. You remember he got the job, I think, in 2020, and soon after, Mutebile passed on, unfortunately, and so he also needed time to adapt and adjust. And I think the president, in his wisdom, also allowed him to adjust to the reality, because it's a critical position.
It's a very critical one.
Yes, it's a critical position.
You spoke about the pedigree of the two gentlemen. Just reading here, Dr. Michael Atingi-Ego is a seasoned economist with extensive experience in central banking and financial policy. Before his tenure as Deputy Governor, he worked at the International Monetary Fund and previously held key positions at Bank of Uganda. His appointment, according to this report, signals continuity in Uganda's monetary policy at a time of economic uncertainty, inflation concerns, as well as external financial pressures. We shall be looking into the monetary policies and the economic uncertainty, inflation concerns, as well as these financial pressures, external pressures rather, that the two gentlemen will be dealing with later. But let's first concentrate on the appointments themselves and the manner of appointment. There is concern, for example, especially on the part of Professor Augustus Nuwagaba, during the closed-door vetting process. It's understood and reported that there was a concern about the fact that the law requires that a deputy governor be an official or a person that has experience in banking. And that Professor Augustus Nuwagaba does not have that hands-on experience in banking. How does that board on the reputation, but most importantly, offering the necessary confidence that this is the right man for the job?
Well, Chris, the law provides two-way.
Two-way,
yes,
okay.
It's either financial or banking. It is not.
It's not specific.
It's not specific whether you should have both. Okay. Professor Nuwagaba, of course, lacked the banking experience, especially in the typical banking way as we know it.
As we know it, yeah.
Yeah. He might fall short at that level, but when you look at his financial pedigree and what he has been able to do in terms of his contribution to economic development and economic growth across the continent, he comes in as one of the most qualified, especially in terms of his experience and his level of contribution across board.
Across board,
he is a credible person. So I think as much as the law limited somehow, they needed either financial or banking. But I think he is still a good
now, in
fit.
fact, his CV is very elaborate. Being a renowned economist, and has been very instrumental, as you say, in advising on Uganda's economic growth strategies as well as poverty alleviation. This particular report also says the former professor of economics at Makerere University holds a master's degree in application of central bank monetary policy on commercial bank competitiveness. So no doubt that is a man who knows everything about banking. He has worked extensively in analysis of fiscal metrics for governments in Africa and is also a member of the African peer review mechanism, and his analysis on tax policy is acclaimed across the globe. This looks like a dynamic duo. And there is all reason to believe that all the troubles that we might have faced as an economy over the last 5 years or so, whether by design or a lack of this particular position being substantively filled, will finally be taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a good development, and particularly when you look at, I'm not worried of Atingi-Ego because he has been at the helm.
He's been at the helm, yeah.
And what he has been able to show and demonstrate over time, especially particularly in the post Mutebile's tenure or his demise, is what we have been able to see. To a greater extent, I think Uganda's economy has been stable. When you look at the inflation, when you look at its the growth trajectory, there are a number of issues, but broadly speaking, I think Uganda's economy has been relatively stable. That's not to say that there are not issues that we needed to address.
Those challenges were there.
Professor Nuwagaba comes in. Interestingly, he is an economic development expert. As much as he has been doing a lot in economic growth, he also has a strong contribution to economic development. Now, this is interesting for Uganda because we are a country that is largely, majority of Ugandans are actually very poor. And in many occasions, government have adopted policies that pushes economic growth when you look at our infrastructure investments. And that a little attention has been given to economic development. With his experience, I want to believe that he will be able to advise government, on certain policies that will spur economic development, because that is where the people are. That is where a majority of us Ugandans are. And his appointment should not be in vain, because I can give you the case in point is the permanent secretary for Minister of Finance. He's also an academic, well-entrenched and expert in economic development. And indeed, he promised an economy that works. Whether the economy is working or not, in people's pockets, that can be debatable. That can be debated. Yeah. But for Atingi-Ego, he comes in handy because he's at the M. We expect his advisory to government should be in a way that appeals to the local people. And the only problem I have with academics, especially us who are in academic, is that in many cases we don't understand how government works, especially in the politics of evidence. So as much as he's an entrenched expert, he has done a lot of things, we can still again have some reservations, because you might be aware that government, by its nature, runs what we call politics of evidence. So as much as you're an entrenched expert with clear rationale of thinking, if your rationale or your rationality should fit within a certain political context. So as much as you might want to advance a certain policy, the other day I heard him talk about debt management, government should reduce its appetite and all that. That is okay for an opinion, but that opinion must be within a political context. And that is most cases in the few what is going to suffer.
In the few hours after the news of his appointment came through, there were some elements that within some voices that said that actually he had at one time been the man primed for the job itself. And then by him coming on board, maybe he's going to have a little bit of trouble, because he's a very assertive consultant, especially when it comes to rolling out advisory blueprints and so forth. So when you say he's going to have to work within a political context, could that complicate his ability to give us the very best of him?
No, we will not. Most definitely, we will not see the very best of him. Because there is already a political framework within which you must think. And we are in a country where most decisions are actually centralized. So if the president thinks otherwise, believe me, your opinion might not find space. In other words, you must realign your thinking with what the president is thinking for it to work. And I think that is a way public policy works by its design in many ways. But I think we will not see so much of him. We are expectant, of course. We are expectant. We want him to deliver on a lot of issues that we are grappling with as a country. But again, like I said, the political environment that is before him might limit him in many ways. And I think his deliverables might not be to the level that we have always seen him advocating for. It goes without saying, since we're still talking about the profile of these individuals. For me, again, I needed to comment especially on the element of transition. All these gentlemen are 60 years. And by the virtue of that positions, there must be a certain thinking of transition within that position. With the continuity aspect. With the continuity aspect. And then you've seen what we suffered, especially when Mutebile passed. Unfortunately, now Atingi-Ego was a little bit a younger gentleman, and he was able to carry that progress. But of course, you know that these gentlemen are all in 60s, and of course, that is already almost a retirement position. But of course, these are professors; they will still extend a little bit. But perhaps that might be a little bit of concern at some point. But for now, it is not. For now, we are still expecting them to deliver, and we are very optimistic.
I'm glad you bring that point up, because in the many questions that came up after the death of Mutebile and the prolonged inability for President Yoweri Museveni to appoint a substantive governor, it pointed to maybe a deficit of gentlemen and ladies of such stature and pedigree as to be captains of this particular economic ship. I do not know whether this will allow for the search to continue for a certain group of gentlemen and ladies, so that we get to a point where we do not encounter a problem like we have encountered for the last 3 years, when the search for somebody like a governor becomes so prolonged to the extent that even the political thinking behind the appointment is no longer plausible.
Chris, one of the biggest challenges that we face in this country is the question of transition. And this is not necessarily limited to the presidency. Yeah, this can go all along to executive directors, to ministers, to even small positions around the country. The question of transition should not necessarily be limited to the presidency. And so every right-thinking leader must have a view that at some particular point there is going to be somebody who should be able to step in and do that same work that he or she is doing. And so I don't think government will pay much attention, especially to search for people to be able to manage, to prepare some people to take over at some point. I don't think it is in the behavior of government, this particular government. I don't think it is in their behavior to prepare leaders to do that. Yeah.
All right, Mr. Bernard Cankara, very elaborate and exhaustive perspective there on the profiles of the two gentlemen. Most importantly, we shall be tackling what they find at the desk in the various racks that are before them, on what they will be getting on with. If they were politicians, maybe we could look at their first 100 days. What will they roll out? But these are not politicians, and no doubt we shall be delving a little bit deeper and also introducing other guests who will be joining us for more perspective. Do stay with us. You're watching Morning at NTV. Welcome back. I'm glad you're still with us here on Morning at NTV. It's the Kickstarter, and we are looking at what awaits the new leadership at the Bank of Uganda. That is the new governor, now designate Dr. Michael Atingi-Ego, and his deputy Professor Augustus Nuwagaba. Before we went into the break, we had elaborately looked at the profiles of the two gentlemen and what they bring on board. We are now joined on set by Mr. Julius Kapwepwe. Julius Kapwepwe is a member of the East African Budget Network. We're also joined by Ezra Byakutanga, Byakutangaza. My apologies for that. Economist, and one that has often been a very dependable analyst when it comes to matters economics. The two gentlemen, you're most welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Great. Bernard Cankara has been very elaborate on the profiles of the two gentlemen, the new governor and the deputy designate. And right now, as our topic states, we would like to delve straight into what awaits them. And if you don't mind, I'll allow a minute or two for you to appreciate the fact that they are on board. But most importantly, lay out for us what you think these two gentlemen have to deal with in as far as Uganda's economy now is concerned, monetary policy, the uncertainties, as well as how to deal with the increasing external pressures of the global economy. I'll go with Mr. Julius Kapwepwe first.
Yeah, thank you very much. Of course, it is to congratulate the two gentlemen, to congratulate the two gentlemen on behalf of Ugandans.
Yeah.
That now you have a more substantive, even numerically, a stronger team at Bank of Uganda than the yesteryears, than the yestermonths. Also recalling that this is happening amidst other recruitments at the Bank of, key recruitments at the Bank of Uganda. So it is something we commend as Ugandans. But also the two gentlemen, even just to narrow down to those specifically, are coming in to join the rest of the governors, if I took a case of the East African community as an example. So Mr. Thuge in the case of Central Bank of Kenya, and I'm bringing this out because they are no longer your usual men that you have always gone with for a walk on the other side, or you have gone with for you know, the other side of town in Soweto, Kanungo, wherever. So yeah, joining Governor Marangu in the case of the DRC Central Bank, joining Rwangobwa in the case of Rwanda, and so the broader East African community is having an additional energy, dose of energy, to be able to deal with the Ugandan local, regional issues as well as the international. There is that interaction along the continent, which we must not lose sight of as Uganda. Right. So as your question says, a number of issues, but for me, some of the key outstanding ones would be from the Pan-African orientation, really, and the African economics. We would wish to see, yesterday, I should say, an East African currency, for instance. So these gentlemen and the rest of the team are coming in at a time when, on several occasions, we've said by this time we should have had the East African currency into play because of the advantages that it plays. By the time you get to that level, as a region, as a SADC, as an East African community, as a ECOWAS or any other body, by the time you come to that level, you have done greater harmonization for mutual economic interests. So that bit, they are coming in to step into the discussion that has already been going through our respective ministries of East African community as a case, but also through the effort for Uganda to have a central bank hosted in Kampala, of which that is going to be a very key institution for East African convergence. So that right. For me is going to be key. Another key area I think quickly they need to look at is again talking about, say, East African wide. How much does it cost me to change from a USD into Kenyan money at Maraba in the case of Uganda, come down to Namanga if I have changed into Tanzanian money, come to Rusumo if I want to go to Burundi, I want to go to Rwanda. That's right. Come here in Bukavu do a bit of purchase, and through Mpondwe or through any other point, come back to Uganda, or even continue to Nimure and cross a bit into
South Sudan.
How much have you lost in terms of value? So those are areas that we can lower the cost of production, we can have monetary value, increase the monetary value of our respective countries and as a region. So we just cannot look at the two gentlemen from the perspective of just one country, but rather the whole ecosystem around the economics and the monetary aspects. Wow,
I'm sure Mr. Byakutanga does agree entirely with that. And when, as the two gentlemen are taking on the role, of course, the greater strategic interests that need to be dealt with and responsibilities, we do appreciate that, no doubt. But again, like we say, Uganda also has very, very pertinent concerns that we need to work on, especially with regard to post-pandemic recovery. We are still in that mode. The volatility that he talks about, the inability for exchange to happen seamlessly in order to lessen the cost, but most importantly, allow productivity to happen as any one of us would want to, is something that is also very, very important. How do you see them hitting the ground? Are they going to be running, or they might decide to hope?
Thank you so much, my brother, the host, and colleagues that have showed up to have this very important conversation. I'll join my colleagues first to congratulate these very seasoned economists who have taken on the role,
no doubt,
of informing and guiding our financial sector. Like my colleagues have said, there's no doubt Dr. Ting and Professor Nuwagaba have a very rich history in monetary policy and management of financial sector. So we have no doubt that amidst the challenges, I mean, it's 3 years since the late Governor Mutebile died, and that has caused a vacuum at the Bank of Uganda and at the regional level, like my brother here was saying. A governor from each state in the East African community countries helps and guides the work together. So we have no doubt that this is to our advantage to have these senior economists take on these positions. What awaits them? Of course, we know primarily the core mandate of the central bank is to manage price stability and ensure that generally our macroeconomic indicators are stable, and that the economy can progress. And in the recent ABSA report, which reports on the financial stability of 29 countries, reported that Uganda was the 4th, and it has been 4th for, I think, the previous 4 reports from ABSA. So that is a good note to start. So can we get Uganda to the 1st position, for example? And what does that benefit us? For example, it helps in the investor confidence here in our currency. So I have no doubt, and I'm looking forward to these people working on that and ensuring that our money value is maintained, if not improved, by any case, so that we can have more confidence of foreign investors, attract more foreign investors in our country, because alongside the monetary value and the price stability that I looked at the tweet of the PS Permanent Secretary to Mr. Govi. He said, "You're welcome. You can now come and we focus on job creation and stabilization of other macroeconomic indicators." So when we zero down to our Ugandan setup, our unemployment levels are increasing by the day. So price stability, yes. Unemployment, major challenge.
Yeah.
Can we, as economists that have taken on Dr. Ting, and ensure there is an effort in that direction? More to say is, recently in the last towards the close of last year, we had several reports of fraudulent or misplaced, I don't know, diverted transactions from the central bank. How can we, as Ugandans, now that we have I
still maintain the word on that, it is brazen theft. Misplacement, you're trying to play with words.
I'm playing with the word, but how can we, if the country can lose close to 60 billion shillings from a central bank, can we restore confidence of Ugandans and the rest of the institutions that are dealing with Bank of Uganda? So that is for me very key, and of course to say that this will help. In Uganda we have a problem of the functionality of institutions. Now, if you can agree with me that without a substantive governor, there is some sort of lack of firmness in decision making at the institution. So we look forward to seeing more firm decisions and recommendations and policies being formulated, especially in the monetary area, being formulated but also implemented.
Okay. I'm glad you speak about the fact that firmness, especially when it comes to policy making and rollout, you should be able to return to the corridors of the central bank. There are elements who said when Mutebile would speak, very many people would listen. It's also feared that some gentlemen saw the gap, the lacuna, and decided to try out some new tactics on stealing, and that is how the brazen theft of that 60 billion Uganda shillings happened. We do hope that the appointment of these two gentlemen will make Bank of Uganda a corrupt-free entity, because it ought to be corrupt-free. Otherwise, national coffers would be flying out as pigeons go out for the day. Mr. Cankara.
Yes, sir.
The issue of borrowing, and this is a debt question, is a very important one for the country. Mr. Nuwagaba, Professor Nuwagaba, I must be very specific, is one that is strong on living within your means. And we can agree that maybe he has the leverage to prevail on the technocrats of the day to ensure that Uganda starts to live within the country's means. I think that is something that is well within his space, away from the political context, thought process that you talked about earlier, that he needs to align himself to.
Absolutely. Debt, there is no any country that borrows itself into growth. Yeah. Any country that tends to borrow exorbitantly will actually end up being a victim of its own self. Why? Because you will end up spending a lot of money paying those the debts that you've probably accrued over time. And if you do not tempt your appetite for borrowing, you actually run a country into a debt trap. And I think that is where we don't want to be. As a country, I think we are now on about 51 or so percent, 52% of debt to GDP. Of course, some economists will say there are countries that are actually at 70%. There are countries that are actually way higher. But truth of the matter is you can never borrow yourself to economic growth and development. And that raises a question as to whether the policies that the two gentlemen will be advancing, whether they will be able to advise government and make government listen. This government, like he has said, they have a lot of appetite for borrowing. And tempering that behavior, it's likely going to be quite a huge task before them. Because at this particular moment, you can see from the previous financial budget, which I think was at 72 trillion. And that speaks to you the level of ambitions of the people that we're dealing with. And then when they realize they cannot actually fund it in this current financial year, they've cut it, I think, with 14 trillion. Because it was not possible that we are able to actually borrow to be able to sustain that budget. So we are likely going to see again a country where we will continue to, the government will continue to seek more funds to borrow. It will be incumbent upon those, the appointed governors, to be able to tempt government to respect that. But that's not to say, you can actually look at either external borrowing or internal borrowing. The one which has been suffocating the economy is the domestic borrowing.
Domestic borrowing.
Yeah. And I think I should congratulate Atingi-Ego that we are able to see a reduction in the domestic borrowing. And I think that will relieve some space for our commercial banks, and a little bit of fairness in terms of how they transact business internally, and that will not squeeze the economy. But again, we are also seeing another growth on the external borrowing. Yeah, there is increase in external borrowing, and I think particularly I'm looking at it in this financial year. So borrowing remains very critical. As to whether Professor Augustus and Dr. Atingi-Ego were able to tempt government, likely not, because the strategic direction that the president has been able to elaborate over time. We are seeing substantial investment in infrastructure. We are seeing the railway project coming up. We are seeing the
industrialization agenda,
the Ginger Express Highway, and all this industrialization aspect remains a far-fetched dream. which requires a lot of investment, and so government will continue to look around. Okay. But that's the most important thing is how will the Bank of Uganda be able to stimulate the economic growth internally so that the revenue generation within the economy improves.
Maybe that's a question Julius Kapwepwe can help us answer, the available options that the central bank can go about tingling. But there's also the long-standing elephant in the room, the price of credit. Especially the commercial banks. Yeah. We are a free market economy, no doubt about it. However, oversight on the part of government as the work conducted by the central bank should be seen to rein in on this kind of practice, not to leave private sector to the whim of banks that choose to do whatever they want, when they want, because after all, the mantra is we are a free market economy.
Yeah, I would actually quickly joke that we are a free regulated market economy.
All right.
I mean, at the helm
of it.
Just speaking one aspect, at the helm of the financial sector is Mr. or Madam Bank of Uganda. Who is the supervisor, is the chief whip, what is happening the other side? Why are you facing the other direction, Bank X or Bank Y? And for a fact, Ugandans and the rest of the world knows, for instance, that government has been very robust through Bank of Uganda. Remembering, Bank of Uganda is a government institution.
It's a government
I don't want us to have a discussion as if a Bank of Uganda is detached from the rest of the state. It is part of the state machinery. So when Bank of Uganda succeeds in the regulatory elements that it has ably delivered, closing down some of the banks that were getting a bit of weed, so a bit of cleaning up. It is in a free economy, but which is regulated. Yeah, we can have an intellectual
So sometimes it's justifiable for those who say we need to see greater.
So if you say greater hand, and now with an additional workforce at the institution, that is certainly welcome. But there is the other aspect you had talked about of the 60 billion story and the attempts, because of the technological improvements, or rather the effort to improve the technologies, go electronic money, for instance, and some of these bits, the hackers, through the different institutions, beginning from the US, if we assume that US is the biggest economy in the world, to the smallest one somewhere in Chad or Central African Republic, the hackers are always at their game on a daily basis. In some cases, they succeed. Oftentimes, they have failed. So the struggle for continuous improvement of having robust systems it can only continue. There will be some loopholes here and there. But the bigger picture, for instance, in the case of Uganda, is that the Bank of Uganda has been very formidable in preventing those kinds of mischief as we saw in the recent case. So your other question on debt, for instance, before we come to the credit one. Yes, when you look at a country like Uganda, there has been increased borrowing. So has been Tanzania, so has been Kenya. Kenya, for instance, has borrowed in excess of about 72% of their... But they're a stronger economy.
It's actually becoming a new case study.
Yes, but on the other hand, they are the strongest economy, quickly being rivaled by Tanzania in the region. So we need to look at the dynamics thereof. The increased borrowing per se is not the issue.
It's not the issue.
But you are borrowing for what is the issue. If you are borrowing, if you've walked to African Development Bank, I'll just pick one example to pick money, and you are able to open up the brand new road that we are seeing from Hoima, for instance, to Kabuoya into Bulisa, as an example, under the Chinese and the World Bank financing, for purposes of getting oil prospects, and you expect a higher dividend to the economy. That's good borrowing. If you have Rukunjiri Kanung Road through African Development Bank financing, and you can quickly evacuate the tea, you can increase your tourism revenues, remembering that tourism is one of the flagship aspects that we have put ourselves as a target to getting more revenues. you are definitely getting that borrowing is worth it. It helps you. You borrow to stop borrowing. You borrow to be able to beg. So there has also been that increased stock of public goods and services as a result of borrowing. So we need to look at it squarely, most likely case by case, but not simply say the borrowing is bad. On the cost of credit, the cost of credit, which also links to what my brother earlier on highlighted, is also to do with the domestic borrowing. So if I have my money, pick my treasury bill or my bond, rather than suffer with this factory hustling to be able to. Yet it would be the other side if you invested in the factory with their 4 billion shillings. That would create the more jobs that we are looking at, the more consumption, the expansion of the economy. So at Bank of Uganda, we also need to go into a discussion on how do we tame down the number of lazy investors in Uganda. Some of the guys, you've seen them, you are hustling in the morning and you even have stopped for them to first cross the road and because they already did the depositing on the other side through the securities. So how do we ensure that those yields for instance, those bonds, for instance, issued through Bank of Uganda, attract a lesser yield, attract a lesser return, so that somebody is like, taking my money here, let me go and open up a farm. Let me go and open up a factory. Through that, you are able to begin to rain down on the otherwise increasing domestic borrowing through that particular aspect of securities as just one of the many components, but also you are able to stimulate the economy for greater production. So through that, then you're also reducing the cost of the cost of money. But the other one that, for instance, the cost of money, if you looked at Bank of Uganda, it has been very central in the dispensing, in the management of trillions, in excess of 3 trillion shillings now, just taking a sample of 2-3 years, that government has been taking out to the community through the parish development model. Those funds ably handled by Bank of Uganda institutions, and the money has been to get to the other side with a bit of potholes here and there, given that it is a mass aspect. But overall, that cleaning up is happening. So improving the electronic systems will also increase the efficiency into our economy, and through that, you are able to lower the cost of production. If you looked at the case of the PDM funds as an example, 6% interest. That's unprecedented. It is the cheapest on the market. So I think increasing through working with the Bank of Uganda, you and I, not just the entire team on the other side alone. They also need advice of the rest of Ugandans. They need support. They need encouragement. They need being whipped. No, here we don't agree with you. And then we are able to go into the same.
That advisory prong is one that is no doubt we shall put to Mr. Ezra Byakutanga. The governors need advice on where exactly and how to intervene. External shocks are being felt already, especially in light of the ascendancy to the presidency of Donald Trump in the United States. It has totally altered how economies are working, and many are actually anticipating greater actions in way of executive orders that could affect how their economies are run. Right now, if we are to sit in the economic war room with the governors, what is the advice?
Thank you so much, Chris. Again, I think one of the biggest whip which we must welcome as Africans, and Uganda in particular, is that of Donald Trump. We must move from this whole comfort of dependency and go into real economic sovereignty. So I think that is one of the things that we need to welcome and take positively, learn from it, and see how do we make our economies independent and self-sustainable. So I want to say that the Bank of Uganda has a very important role in the way of our fiscal policies. They must be very firm in advising and taming the expenditures of government. And that said, when Mr. Gobi said you're welcome to household, it must, for me, it spoke more than that. They have to be on the round table together and look at all these poverty elevation programs and assess them. Chris, you want to remember that less than 50% of our targets in NDP3 were met. And we are now kicking off with NDP 4. And we have a vision 2040 to modernize our economy, to move our economy from a subsistence economy to a modern economy. So what does that mean for the new appointed governors? It means that whatever policy we must implement at a strategic level must translate into improving household livelihoods. And that means that we must review how, for example, we are implementing programs such as the PDM. We must ensure that the commercial banks that are in direct touch with the households adhere to the policies. For example, when the central bank lowers its central bank rate, what do the commercial banks and all the other financial institutions do on the other end? So for me, I think it is, and again, we wish to remember that this is 2025 and we are getting into a political season where we have a very big challenge as a country.
That's right.
Where the country is entirely 90%, the politics is 90% or if not 100 and so % monetary. So where does this money come from? So the Bank of Uganda at this particular time, and we tend to see that the inflation levels shoot at around this time. Because there is a lot of currency. Somehow, I don't know how this currency comes into the
it has to facilitate electioneering.
So this the bank of the governor and deputy governor have a very huge task.
That's right.
One, to review. You know, I read so much the work of another economist, Ezra Byakutanga, and who is one of the brains behind the PDM, which we say is the biggest driver, which is going to transition many Ugandans from subsistence to financial, commercial livelihoods. But there is one aspect that we have left out: the parish banks. Parish banks. In that first concept of the PDM, so is it the time for the governor and the deputy governor to think about
it and roll it out? Maybe it is. All right, just to reassure you, the new governor noted after his vetting to journalists that their aim will be to support the economic growth of between 6 and 7%, that is with regard to managing inflation. 2025, he says it will be anywhere between 4 and 5, and this is consistent with the growth target that we are looking at in the medium term of 6 to 7%. We have been having inflation of between 3 and 3.8%, and the growth was trending below 6%. So no doubt we should be able to work well within the 5% targets that were set. Gentlemen, I'm out of time, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to end this. So in 30 seconds, I'll begin with Bernard Cankara. Your last word.
Chris, we run a cylindrical economy. By that I mean there is huge income disparity in Uganda. Before the governors is dealing with financial inclusion aspect. And that requires a lot of issues that needs to be done. The other aspect which is very critical is the aspect of adherence, like he just mentioned, especially the microfinance institutions that tend to charge exorbitantly high income, and that needs to be addressed. So then people can find the value for their money. Otherwise, people are wasting their money. They are paying a lot on interest, and in the end of it all, you don't get really what you should have done. Lastly, a good public policy can only be made when you listen to the people. The Central Bank of Uganda has been that institution that we think that is so far detached from the people. So I would imagine that for them to be able to come up with good public policy, they should move out of the boardrooms and go to the local people and listen to what they say, the experiences they're going through. That way, they will adopt good public policy practice.
Julius Kapwepwe, very quickly.
Thank you. To thank the team that was in acting capacities and the deputy then now elevated to governor. Really, through the years, And in the post-COVID era, there was a lot of effort and a lot of success in ensuring macroeconomic stability of our country, taking inflation as a case that you've just looked at. So we think we'll continue on that gentle slope so that we are able to have the continued steady growth of the economy and the expansion of our GDP.
On a lighter note, I love the way you do this. It reminds me of a man who thinks we should be.
Well, the hue and that was a different discussion. Yeah, this one will be gentle, like a gentle slope, kind of progressive gentle.
All right. Mr. Byakutanga?
Thank you, Byakutanga.
Byakutanga, my apologies, my apologies.
Chris, again, like Cankara
very quickly
has said, Bank of Uganda needs to move out of the boardroom and interact with especially the youngest population, and our biggest problem is unemployment. All right, you've said it all. Thank you very much. Bernard Cankara, many thanks. Thank you. Ezra Byakutanga, many thanks for the perspectives, and of course many thanks to you too, Julius Kapwepwe, for making time and appearing on Morning at NTV. I hope the conversation has been able to embolden your understanding of the tasks that are at hand for the Governor-designate Dr. Michael Atingi-Ego and Deputy Governor-designate Professor Augustus Nuwagaba. It's been a pleasure. We're going for a break. Morning at NTV does continue. Stay with us.